Hi everybody, welcome back to Newton Community Farm. I'm Hope and it's Wednesday and we're going to talk about farming and gardening. Today we're going to talk all about garlic. This time of year in New England, this time in July is all about garlic harvest, so I think any farmer or gardener that you talk to is probably getting ready to or in the middle of harvesting their garlic. So it's very exciting. I think garlic is the coolest crop around. So we're going to talk a little bit about garlic's lifespan, planting, caring for it, harvesting, and then curing and storing if that's what we end up doing. So this garlic I just pulled out of the ground in the learning garden. And as you can see, it's pretty bulbous, which is what you would see if you bought this at the grocery store. You can see it's got four big bulbs. They're pretty sizable. And then the roots and the stalk, and I've kind of pulled a few of those leaves off the top. So we'll harvest together afterward, but I want to kind of crack this open, see what's inside, and talk about the beginning of garlic's lifespan. So we'll see how easy this is to open up. Garlic is it's so cool because it's planted in the fall and it spends so much time underground in the winter time, which just seems amazing because it's so cold here. And then in the spring we get this garlic that we're all familiar with. So if you've ever bought a head of garlic, which many of us have, you're familiar with how it looks. So it's a collection of cloves. And typically at the grocery store it's cut here, or at a farmer's market even it would be cut here. And you have each of the cloves that are kind of focused around a central nerve or a central stalk. It's not really a nerve. And then you have your individual cloves. And so this is pretty moist still. It hasn't been cured. It hasn't dried out. A lot of times when we buy garlic at the store, it's been cured so it can sit on your countertop for however long until you use it. But fresh garlic, you can eat it right out of the ground. It doesn't have to cure. It won't stay as long on your shelf, but it's still really delicious and great. And in the beginning of garlic's life cycle, these are actually technically the seeds, which, again, garlic is so cool. At the end of any farming season, we'll talk all about ideal garlic to save, but you would save these heads of garlic, and this would be your seed. So in October or November, at some point in the fall, depending on where you live, this is what you're going to put in the ground. Just like you would put a bean seed in or a carrot seed, you would put this in to grow garlic. So it's fall, we're out in the garden, we're ready to plant our garlic. Everything else in the garden is kind of going to bed for the winter. We've got our cover crop, the soil's covered, and we have our space for our garlic. So we have these cloves, and I don't think it really matters if you kind of peel off the layers or if you leave them on. I imagine this is the way to go. But when you are planting, you'll dig a little hole and you'll put the garlic in the soil, pointy side up and root side down. And then you'll cover it up and then you'll put mulch on top. And it should be give or take 4 inches deep. It should be down there, so account for that when you're burying it, making sure that you're accounting for the mulch that you're going to use. You can use straw. We use salt marsh hay here at the farm. You can use leaves. We just did an episode last week all about mulch, so if you're curious about learning more with any crop in the garden, but including garlic, you can check out that episode all about mulch. And then the garlic sits there, and all winter long it's under the soil, under the mulch, just kind of hanging out for the whole winter, which is amazing. And then in the spring, through the straw or the hay or whatever mulch you use, at some point when the soil starts to warm up again and spring is on the horizon, we'll see the little green shoots come up out of the ground. And that's the garlic that turns into these stalks. And this stalk has a number of dead leaves, but when we walk over into the garden, you'll see that a lot of the garlic that's in there is starting to die off like this, but it still has some healthy green leaves. And when we're looking to harvest, we can look at our calendars. Like I said, a lot of farmers and gardeners right now are all kind of harvesting at the same time, at least in our area, this week in July. But you can also tell by looking at how many leaves are dying like this and yellowing and beginning to wilt. It doesn't mean that anything's wrong with the plant. It just means it's time to harvest. So typically it's when, there are different ways of measuring it. I've heard you should still have 5 green leaves. I've heard 50% dead leaves or 75% dead leaves. So there's a lot of different ways to tell, but you should still have some green leaves when you harvest. It helps to develop that kind of papery wrapper that you feel around your garlic when it's stored. So it helps if you're planning to cure your garlic and store it for the upcoming year in the fall. It's good to keep some green leaves on there to help develop that kind of papery coating. So that's the beginning of garlic's life cycle. And through the summer, again, you don't really have to do all that much to garlic, and now we're in that week where we're going to get ready to harvest. So let's walk over to the garden and we'll talk a little bit about harvesting as the next phase of garlic's life. And we'll leave that there for now. So in the field right now at Newton Community Farm, we are nearing the end of our garlic harvest. So we had 5 beds total of garlic that we planted last fall, and it's all either out of the soil or on its way out of the soil. And it's all in the barn, and we'll take a look at the process of harvesting and hanging the garlic up to dry. So this is the bed in the learning garden. This garlic was planted last fall, and it's just about ready to come out. It definitely should come out by the end of the week. And we'll take a closer look at why we know it's ready, how we know it's ready. So, as you can see, this is the salt marsh hay that we laid in the fall. So we took one of those cloves, or a number of those cloves, plopped them in the soil, covered them up, laid this straw down, and then we haven't done anything to them since. And they do all their own work. The one thing to remember is that in terms of care for garlic, there's one point in the summer where a curly green, like curlicue will pop out of the top of your garlic, and that's called a scape. And those are actually really delicious to eat, and I know people get really excited about garlic scape harvest because it's a short window in the summer where they're tender enough to cook and eat. And those should be harvested from your garlic. So if you look up close to these, this is a good example. So you'll kind of see this little nub here on this piece of garlic, and that was cut, I don't know, maybe like 3 weeks ago. And the scape had been growing out in a curly fashion, and we cut it off so that the plant would continue to send all of its energy down underground to develop a bigger, fuller head of garlic. So it's kind of like a win-win. You harvest the garlic, you have fresh garlic scapes, and then you have bigger, like rounder heads of garlic when you harvest. So other than that, garlic is totally low maintenance. So when we're harvesting, I'm looking for the leaves dying back. So you can see that some leaves on my plants have completely died, and some are on their way out, and some are still like kind of healthy, not very healthy. But this is a good stage to harvest. And I brought this pitchfork out just in case the soil is kind of compacted, if it's been walked on or if it's compacted for any reason. I would use my pitchfork along the sides of the bed, but I wouldn't go too close to the plants for fear that I would stab a head of garlic, which would be sad. So I don't think I'll need that today, but this is a tool that I would bring out if I were harvesting my garlic. So for the most part, we're gonna, if this were my first head of garlic that I were pulling up, I would pull one and just make sure that it's ready. And that's what I did with the garlic that I showed you at the picnic table, and it was pretty full and it looks like a healthy head of garlic. So we're gonna continue our harvesting. So when you're harvesting, I'll move some of this hay out of the way. And I'll just grab down as low as I can. You know, pulling from all the way up here, you might snap the head a little bit. So I'll kind of pull low. And there's a really nice head of garlic. And it's, as you can see, it's pretty easy to yank them up out of the soil. And one by one, I'll kind of just move my way down the line. Some of these are a lot smaller than others. But even though the top of the plant is smaller, I'm still seeing some pretty nice bulbs underneath. So that's garlic harvest. Just like planting and caring for garlic, it's pretty straightforward and easy. And it's exciting. I mean, this garlic would last a really long time. And sometimes you'll see some garlic that has a funky coloring, and we'll wash these off before we store them at all. It's like a little bit brown in here. The purple is normal, but the brown I would have to look at to see if it's any kind of rot or mold, which can happen. But that's the ins and outs of garlic harvest. It's pretty simple. There's more to the storage of garlic, which is what we're gonna hop onto now. So, like I said, this garlic can all be eaten fresh, and it can be stored as well. So it all depends on what you're looking to do with your garlic harvest. So here at the farm, we've been distributing some fresh garlic, but a lot of our garlic is in the barn getting ready to be cured, which means that it'll be hung to dry out, essentially, in a place with good airflow, which the barn has pretty good airflow. And then that garlic will be able to store in a cabinet or on a kitchen counter for months and months, which is exactly what we want when we're growing in bulk. So we'll add these to the pile. And it's always kind of blowing my mind how much garlic we can grow on such a small area of land. So this is the garlic supply right now. This is all garlic that's waiting to be hung up. And up above you see all the garlic that is already hanging. This is all kind of happening live, so these are all have just been tied up, and they'll stay up for at least a month, and the airflow can help to ensure that they don't get moldy or rotty or anything like that. So obviously we have really high ceilings in here. It's a great place to hang garlic, but you don't have to have your own barn to hang garlic. You could do it in your kitchen, by the window, or anything like that. And the coolest thing about garlic is that we're kind of coming back now to the beginning of the cycle. So it's July, we're thinking about, distributing this garlic that we have, preserving it as best we can, and setting aside some stock for planting in the fall. So on this side of the barn, over by the door, we have our kind of best cream of the crop garlic. And we judge the best garlic by counting the cloves that it has in the head. So if you look at any of these garlic, you can count, I can't even come close to reaching that, but you can count the different cloves, the number of cloves in each head. And basically, when we're thinking about saving garlic for seed or saving it for planting in the fall, we want to think about passing on the best genes that we can. So not only do we want like the big, beautiful, bulbous heads of garlic, but we want the ones with the most number of cloves, because then hopefully the following season we'll have more and more heads of garlic that have a high number of cloves. So we'll let those cure out, and come fall they'll go back in the ground outside, all separated, and the cycle begins all over again. And that's garlic. Again, if you want to learn more about mulching, we do have an episode on that. It's pretty relevant to garlic, especially in the planting phase. And otherwise, if you're in the middle of your garlic harvest, I hope it's going well. It's a very exciting time. And as always, tune in next Wednesday for more farming and gardening. Bye.